Yo guys, welcome back to another video. We got more bans. At the end of the Japan finals the other day, they announced that there will be a new ban and restriction list announced at the the second day of the Worlds tournament that's going to be going on later in March over here in Japan. And I know everyone's kind of been talking about it, giving their thoughts, and I wanted to make a quick video kind of just going over maybe what they might be considering banning or restricting, taking just a nice little logical approach. I'm not here to make any kind of crazy hot take video. I'm not trying to stir up any flames or anything, but they announced it, it's happening, so you might as well talk about it, right? But yeah, that's it. Just gonna go over it, give you guys my thoughts, maybe see if we can kind of crack the code and see what might get banned or restricted. But without any further ado, let's just jump in and let's get started. Just to kind of like start things off here, this is kind of how I approached it last time. I think the first question you should ask yourself, right, is like, to ban or not to ban? Like, is it even necessary? And I'm just gonna like cut to the chase. I don't really think anything should be banned right now. The meta is pretty healthy, especially with like green purple Luffy coming onto the scene from EBO2, kind of shaking the meta up. Like, if you put a gun to my head and just ask me like, do you think we actually need to ban anything, I would just say no. So I know that's not really a hot take or anything, but I don't really see anything as completely necessary. But I do think this is interesting. If Bandai does think that some stuff should be banned or restricted, I mean, I think there could be a few things that could be done to make things maybe just a little bit more like wide open. Like, it's hard to even really say fair because nothing feels like super unfair, but it could be kind of like their way of approaching the meta so that it doesn't get out of hand in the future. And that's kind of my thought of why they're announcing these bans and restrictions. So to sum it all up, I would say no, I don't think anything's super necessary, but this could be an interesting way to kind of like hedge their bets and make sure things don't get out of control like they did with Red Purple Law for us over here in the East. Whether that's actually a good thing or a bad thing, only time will tell. But let's jump into it and let's just talk about it. So looking back, right, let's talk about what's been banned. And I'm not going to go over like the restriction and like the bans that happened in the West with like Newgate, Whitebeard, and like some of the Rad Beam and the Marco restrictions and all that kind of stuff. We're just going to look at like what's been banned globally across the board. Obviously we had Kabaji and Moby Dick get banned early on in the game. Shout out to Moby Dick. And shout out to Kabaji. Like, dude, some of those early Whitebeard and Nami decks were crazy. Then later on, right, we had Sakazuki, the whole leader just got banned, Great Eruption, and Reject. And this was really interesting because I think a lot of people were expecting stuff like maybe Great Eruption, maybe Ice Age. Reject was like kind of like, yeah, it's definitely an overtuned card, but I'm not sure. I don't think a lot of people were expecting the full banning of just Sakazuki and these two cards. But after they were banned, it actually kind of made sense, and I think the meta was probably more healthy for it. Like, especially now looking back on Reject, and as much as I miss the Sky Aggro Yamato with Reject, which is probably like my favorite deck that I've ever played so far in One Piece, Reject is a card that probably should not be around, so it's good that they banned it. And then the more recent ones of NES Lobby and just the, you know, Red Purple Law leader itself, these ones I think were a little bit easier for us to kind of call. We were expecting potentially even a Lucci leader banned, I know some of us, but or like Ice Age or something. But banning Lobby and just Red Purple Law himself was probably the right call. I know a lot of people really loved RP Law, but dude, things got so out of hand over here in Japan. Like, once Black Maria and Pudding and just all the stuff combined made Red Purple Law just like a very ridiculous and probably the most gatekeeping deck that we've ever experienced. And then obviously with him gone, Lucci would have been too strong, so banning Lobby was probably the right choice there. All right, so the way I want to approach this is like to kind of think like, okay, the bans have been announced. What are they targeting? What's the problem? I maybe should even use that in quotations. And from my own experience, and I would like to say just up front, I live in Japan. I've played through OP10 and we're like halfway through EBO2 right now. OP11 is coming out in like 2 weeks over here in the East, right? So I've gone through the whole OP10 meta and we're going through EBO2 right now. And just to kind of think like what's kind of the problem as far as I see is like things that are just completely overtuned, things that make it not as like the game not as easily accessible to people, especially like beginners or people who play more casually. and just like gatekeeping and decks that are so strong that it's like, sure, this tier 7 deck beats this deck, but that deck could never get to the meta to the point where that'll actually matter. Like those kinds of things I think are pretty common in One Piece. And let's just talk about, I have essentially, we got Doffy leader and his cards, Teach leader and the cards that revolve around him, and then I have some just like generic overtuned cards that I want to talk about. These are not necessarily my thoughts on what I actually think is going to get banned or anything, but just like things that we can kind of pull up to the front and look at under a microscope and maybe talk about, are they worthy of a ban, or like what's the problem with them. So starting off, we have Doffy. Obviously he's kind of been like the best deck for a couple sets now, and I mean, it's a little bit arguable in EBO2 with green purple Luffy, but at the end of the day, he's still in contention for the best deck in format and is still a really overtuned and really powerful leader. We did get an announcement the other day that the 4-cost law, I believe, is going to be reprinted in the PRB2 set. So while I initially thought that this would be the card that might get banned, or at least restricted from Doffy, it looks like that's probably not the case anymore. So in my mind, I think the other two cards that probably cause the most problems are Jinbei, obviously just because you get to play an extra body for free, and 2-cost Teach, which is essentially just like the turbo engine that lets Doffy do crazy aggro things early game, and then insane combos mid to late game where you're just like cycling. You can play multiple 4-cost laws, lots of things that you can do, and Teach is definitely one of those cards that kind of just like makes it so that Doffy can be even more aggro and more just dominating, and like just gives him that extra push that most decks can't keep up with. And essentially, you know, like the only deck that really uses this 2-cost Teach right now is Doffy. I think this would be a good card to hit if you're gonna ban any card in the Doffy deck. Looking with seemingly 4-cost law is not possible anymore, and if you ban Jinbei, the thing with 4-cost law and Jinbei is like decks like Boa, and I'm sure there's going to be future 7 Warlord decks that would like to use it, but it's kind of hard, right? So yeah, I think just looking at it like this, obviously there's other choices like 4-cost Boa, Perfume is a really good card, but I don't think any of those are necessarily like the problem. And if you don't hit Doffy with any of these bans or restrictions, it might just mean that he just becomes too powerful. So in my mind, they're gonna have to hit multiple things in order to like try and keep the balance of everything, right? So that's Doffy in a nutshell. Let's move on to Teach. Teach has a few key cards that are just like ridiculous. I mean, we all know how strong 10-cost Teach is, but I don't think that's just such a staple of the deck and like literally the card that it revolves around. So I don't really see that getting banned. There are some options here. Hachinosu, the stage card, is kind of just like, if you hit it early, just the not having to pay any Dawn to search for free and trash a card, which you want to be doing anyways to get your cards like Burgess higher in power, is just so strong and kind of allows you to basically just find your pieces no matter what, and kind of just makes it so that, like, you're not wondering if you're going to see the cards in your deck, you're just wondering when. And since you already have other search with like the 1-cost search event and Lafitte being a searcher himself, like, I don't know, it's just this deck has become a little bit too consistent, I would say. And with new cards like 5-cost Kuzan introduced in OP10, it's just kind of ridiculous because you, like, at least before, like, if you KO'd Teach's Burgess and sent him to the trash, like, you know, by swinging over him or something, like, it was like, okay, he can't get that out of the trash, like, it's gone, I don't have to worry about it anymore. But with Kuzan, like, now Teachers can just ditch Burgess for counter and just bring it back with Kuzan later while drawing. Like, honestly, Kuzan is pretty overtuned. I think most people would agree with that, but since OP10 hasn't come out in the West, I don't know if I see them hitting any cards past OP9. So with that in mind, I think the main card, and I think if any card is getting hit in Blackbeard, it's Burgess. I think Burgess might get banned, and the reason I kind of think this is because there's the new starter decks that are coming out later this year, and what I think might happen is Burgess gets banned, and then they kind of reprint a new Burgess, essentially like a slightly nerfed Burgess or something like that in the starter deck to make sure that Teach is still able to keep up with the meta and like give him buffs in other ways, because when like your deck essentially just revolves around getting Burgess and 10 cost Teach on the board, and when you're so consistently able to do so, and so many decks struggle to actually like fight against you doing that, you become like a little bit of a just a monster. Like Teach is kind of the monster gatekeeping deck of the format. Like DOFFY is also pretty gatekeeping just with his power, but I think Teach just like being so strong and consistent where you deny people essentially like the ability to play their deck the way they want to can be really frustrating. And as like a game design, like looking at it in like the frame of like actual game design, I have plenty of friends and plenty of people I know where they're just like, dude, I don't care if I lose to DOFFY 100 times. I would rather play a DOFFY than just like play Teach and just not be able to play the game. And I sympathize with that for sure. It's fun to try and like figure out the best way to beat Teach with your preferred deck of choice and like teching for him and stuff, but at the end of the day it is kind of just like he's running away with a little bit too much consistency and too much power. And like I don't know what they were thinking with Kuzan, because they printed this card, and so now we're like bordering like red purple law territory where it's just like, oh well, like if they print one or two more good cards for Teach, then like what's gonna happen? He's just gonna be like too powerful, you know, like that's a possibility. So I could see them preemptively just banning Burgess and then printing another card in the future. I don't know. I'm not saying that Teach is like a broken deck. Yes, I know he loses to other decks, and yes, I know there are ways to like learn the matchup and play around it, but it's undeniably incredibly strong, incredibly consistent, and he does become sort of like a boogeyman in the fact that he's gatekeeping a lot of decks, and you just don't play the normal like regular game of One Piece when you're playing against him. So because of that, I could definitely see something within his deck getting hit. I don't think the leader himself will be banned, but we'll see. All right, now moving on to what I consider like are the overtuned cards. And again, I don't necessarily think any of these will or should be banned. I just want to talk about them. One is Gum Gum Giant. Obviously, this card is just like super duper strong. Sorry, I have the Japanese on there. I didn't realize I got the Japanese one. But you guys probably know the effect by now, and I think Gum Gum Giant probably should have been just draw one card, so that you at least have to go -1 in hand, because the fact that you can play this, you ditch a card but you draw two, is just really strong. Yes, it is leader locked to Straw Hat leaders, but like, I don't know, man. If there's a card that gets restricted, I could see this being one of them. I don't think it's necessarily super unfair or anything. I think this is a card that stuff like Ploofy, Green Purple Luffy, even like Robin, they kind of need this card in order to give them like a fighting chance to get into the meta or stay in the meta if they get there, like the top of the meta. So I would feel kind of bad if this card got banned, but I could see a restriction down to 1 or 2. I know that normally doesn't happen, so I don't really think that's going to happen. So I think Gum Gum Giant's probably safe. Moria, if they're gonna ban something from Teach and DOFFY, the like most logical next step to try and make sure that everything is balanced is maybe restricting or banning Moria. I think most people would agree that what they really should have done back in like OP 6, 7, 8 is just leader lock this to Moria leader, or like come up with some kind of errata, or just like not let you run it in a deck. There can be deck restrictions that you place, you know, and you don't have to stop printing the card. I think there are a ton of things that Bandai could be doing, but they're just not, and I don't know, like this is the card, probably Moria, right, is like the card that has ruffled the most feathers. People hate this card, people love this card, people, you know, live and die by this card. And you know, he's been the boogeyman multiple times throughout a lot of sets. I could see Moria either just getting banned or restricted. What I wish they would do is do something like make an errata or leader lock it to Moria or something, or Thriller Bark, so that Perona can use it too. That would be awesome. That's what I would like to happen. I don't think that'll happen, so I can see him just nothing happening, getting banned or restricted. Let's talk about Pudding, another card. I know, especially right now in the West, a lot of people hate this card because she is a little bit overtuned. It does kind of just, if you're playing DOFFY and you have Pudding, you always have a way to get around, you know, decks that if they could not worry about their hand size and just like, you know, not have the fear of having to shuffle their hand back into their deck, I think they would have just really strong advantageous matchups against DOFFY. You know, stuff like Anel already is winning against DOFFY, but if Anel, stuff like Bonnie, if you didn't have to worry about your hand size and you could just like try and get your ACOS kid on the board and have no fear of like a pudding coming down. BY Luffy too. If you didn't have to worry about pudding, I mean, a lot of those matchups would probably just become straight up favored against Doflamingo if they weren't already. And I don't know if that's a good thing. Like, pudding might be a necessary card that's just overtuned, kind of similar to Gum Gum Giant. I see Gum Gum Giant and pudding in like kind of the same vein of like, it's not a necessarily broken card. I don't think it should be banned outright, but they kind of, I think they made it a little too powerful. I know some people making suggestions of like, if it was you have to trash your hand down to 5, or like put cards to the bottom of your deck until it's down to 5, or if it was like, even if it was just then your opponent draws 6 cards, that would make it harder to use and it would hurt less against your opponent. I don't know if it would be strong enough to even consider running at that point, but those are just some things. So pudding, I don't think this will get banned. I don't think it'll get restricted either. It's just going to be a slightly overtuned card that I think people are going to have to live with, at least for a little while, until it gets to the point of it completely just being abused by something, and then they might have to reconsider. And the last one here is Ice Age. I think this is just another overtuned card, but it's not broken. This card just gives so much advantage in decks like Lucci though, where just one Dawn for -5 and a trigger that's pretty good is kind of crazy, and it's insane to think this came out in Opio too. But yeah, this is another card where it's like, in order to essentially what I think these overtuned cards are going to come down to is like, what do they initially ban from something like Doffy or Teach, and then how are they going to balance the rest of the meta by either, you know, banning or restricting these 4 cards on the screen. You know, again, like if you don't ban Moria but you make Doffy and Teach worse, then you have the fear of something like Lucci or Smoker being too strong, and maybe you need to restrict Ice Age down to 1. I don't think this will get banned. I could see a restriction down to 1, but I don't think it'll get hit. I think out of all these cards, Moria is the only one that's like really, in my mind's eye, like a potential ban or restriction. The other ones, like, I think there are more nuanced ways that Bandai could approach restricting or limiting them to how they're being able to be played, but I don't see them taking a nuanced approach here. So in my mind, I think they're all probably safe, but I think it's worth mentioning that these are cards that at least I consider to be overtuned, and in the right, or you might see it as the wrong meta, like can be too powerful with certain leaders. And starting to kind of just wrap things up here, people have been talking about a possible unbanning, which is, you know, it's possible. I don't see anything like Kabaji, NES Lobby, or Red Purple Law getting unbanned, or Great Eruption for that matter. But if there was some crazy universe we live in where they're gonna unban some stuff, Sakazuki is possible. I do think it could be a mistake, you know, to let the old man out of his cage. But this is a leader that might not be able to take advantage of the meta like he did before. Kind of like, you know, Newgate kind of ruled the world for a couple sets there, and then stuff like Sakazuki and Moria and Pluffy came out, and the meta, like, you know, kind of adjusted, and they were strong enough. It's just power creep, right? Like, power creep comes and it kind of, like, in a good or bad way, will change what the previous meta is, right? So I think you could give him a shot. I don't want to go too deep into like this, because this is total speculation, but maybe Sakazuki would be okay to unban. He is a 4-life leader, and if we get Sakazuki's running around, I'll just bust out Yamato, so I'm cool with it. And then we got Moby Dick. Just, this is kind of for the meme. I'll just unban the boat, right? I think it'd be really fun to watch what happens, but maybe I would be sad because this is a really, really strong card, and it has the trigger that says play this card, so it's like barely ever a detriment in the, you know, whatever Newgate or you know, Whitebeard Pirates build deck you're running. So but I don't think it's, I mean, I don't know, this could be a broken card if we let it out, but I'm not sure. But these two, I think there's a tiny little chance that they could get unbanned, but that's all that I'm thinking for that. All right, so I want to wrap this up. I don't want to go on too long. What do you think will get banned and restricted? Let me know down in the comments. I think I've pretty much gone over my own personal takes, but of the 4 cards up at the top that you can see that I think are the overtuned cards, if anything actually does get hit, I kind of could see it being Moria. I personally would love to see Ice Age get restricted as a green player, but I understand it's a very pivotal and crucial card to a lot of black decks. And then as far as the stuff that's gonna get hit from Doffy and Teach, if it does, I think Burgess, I honestly think Burgess, like of all the cards, I think Burgess is probably the one that might get hit. More than anything from Doffy. I think Burgess might get hit. And then with Doffy, we could see just a leader ban. It's very possible. I don't know how that would really help to like balance the meta. They would have to do a lot of stuff. Like the more action they take for the current top leaders of banning and restricting them, the more they have to do around the other cards and other leaders to make sure that they balance everything. So I think they got to be really, really careful. But if you ask me if they're not going to ban Doffy leader, if they're going to ban just one card, because we are confirmed getting a reprint of 4-cost Law, I think it's going to be 2-cost Teach. But those are the main cards. That's what I think. Let me know what you think. I personally don't really have any strong feelings for actually really wanting anything to get banned. I just would rather them focus more on helping out the other colors and other leaders to be able to get to the same level, and just give them, we've seen in the past like set or two, we've seen some nice card design where they're kind of creating cards to help deal with stuff like Burgess, with like the new 8-cost Secret Rare Luffy for OP11. There's tons of stuff that I think Bandai is doing right, and it seems like they're kind of going down the right path. So let's kind of just have some hope, I guess, that they do a good job of like making this not a terrible ban restriction list. And hopefully it'll be for the better. And if you are someone who mains Doffy or mains Teach, my condolences, because I think those are the two main ones that might get hit. No, I don't think 8-cost Kid is gonna get banned. Get that shit out of here. I don't think that's happening. Trust me, Green needs all the help they can get right now. But yeah, that's it. So thank you for watching. As always, I really appreciate it. If you want to see me playing One Piece over on Twitch, I stream there 2 to 3 times a week at Fidelio TCG. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing, because it really helps me out. But that's it for me, so I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.